A very good evening to one and all present here for the 119th episode of Future Talk series conducted by Prayaana. This is Tejaswini, your host for today's session. I would like to welcome all the viewers who have joined us through YouTube live stream. Now let's have a look at our Prayaana organization. Or the next slide. Divyashki, the next slide. Prayaana is a unique employability, entrepreneurship, and innovative ecosystem for women. Prayaana Labs gives wholesome career support services right from career counseling, training, mentoring, and recruitment services under one umbrella. You can also check us at www.prayaana.org. Are you a student, a working woman, or a woman who wants to resume your career after a long break and upgrade your skills? Then Prayaana is just the right platform for you. To register, join us at www.prayaana.in or download our app on App Store or get it on Google Play. So what are you waiting for? Create your profile today. It's a community hub where you can share your thoughts, ideas, and network with women of similar interests. We also provide membership modules and training programs over international and well-acclaimed mentors. So check it out right now. Prayaana Collective or Pracol. It is India's first e-commerce platform that is dedicated to the empowerment of women. The platform is uniquely designed with an attractive affiliate marketing model where all the customers are given an opportunity for lifetime savings and earnings. Remember, for every purchase you make on Pracol, you're supporting a woman's business growth. Here's how you can actively interact in today's session. Post your queries at the live chat in our YouTube channel. The queries will be shared to guests live and answered. How many of us went blank when trying to balance LHS equal to RHS in our mathematics equations? Well, few of us might point out ourselves, including me. Did we go in search of complex formula further? Or did we realize it was a simple way to crack the problem? Are there some simple ways to face situations in our lives and win obstacles? This evening, we will have live interaction with our speaker for today's session, Ms.Elsa Georgie, who is a psychotherapist and RCI licensed clinical psychologist at NIMHANS. Now let's have a look at her profile. Ms.Elsa Georgie is a clinical psychologist by training, a psychotherapist by practice, with a vision to build sustainable, affordable, and accessible quality mental health care. She finished her MPhil in clinical psychology from NIMHANS, Bangalore, India, and is registered with Rehabilitation Council of India (RCI). She worked as clinical psychologist at NIMHANS for 2 years, after which she eventually decided to embark on her journey specializing in psychotherapy. With a decade's experience as a psychotherapist, she has over 10,000 hours of clinical work, inclusive of psychological assessments and therapy to credit. In addition to the same, she has wide experience as a research guide in teaching and supervising students of psychology and beginner therapists. She believes true healing is a journey that occurs in two parts: by learning authentically to connect oneself, by learning to authentically connect to another. She tries to bring this into the space she offers. Ma'am, we are great to have you as a part of this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah. So thank you, Tejaswini, for that very nice introduction. So we are here today to speak about finding balance, simple wins over everyday obstacles. So I would like to just start off with giving a primer on what this webinar can give. I have tried here to extrapolate the best research out there and try to simplify it to generic, everyday tips that will work if applied precisely and consistently. This webinar follows a very basic primary prevention approach. So thus, it is not a substitute for tailor-made individualized therapies and other treatment formats. So if you're going through mental health concern right now as we speak, I strongly advise you to consider seeing a mental health professional and take it from there. Now, because I've tried to bring in a lot of information, what I'd advise the viewers is to keep a pen and paper right by your side so that you can jot down all these important points. And you will find a little bit of activities and some tips that you can jot down and eventually ask me questions on it by the end of the session. So without any further ado, I will actually start off the session. Let me start off with a story. The alarm is ringing and you hit the snooze button. After 10 minutes, your alarm rings all over again and you hit the snooze button again. Before you know it, you're late by an hour. You jump out of bed. Your head is reeling with the amount of things to do and thoughts keep rushing into your mind. As you rush to that bathroom and start brushing your teeth, your thoughts keep reeling and your head is reeling right now. You can only think about all the things that you have yet to do and you're late. You have to cook breakfast, you have to rush into that meeting right now, you have a lot of things to do. You then suddenly remember that you have a meeting in another 5 minutes. The breakfast can wait. You don't have the time to change and look decent enough for that meeting. Why do people set up such early morning meetings? You've grown. Your partner is sleeping. You're worried if he will be late to his work. Never mind. Just rush into that meeting now and we'll figure the rest out later. What usually happens is that as the day goes by, things keep happening and you just keep moving from one thing to the next and to the next and to the next. And before you know it, the day has already come to an end. And your list of things which you started your day with is still staring right back at you. Maybe one of you have children to add to all the drama. Maybe another one of you have your parents or your in-laws staying with you. Maybe you're single, but that means that figuring a lot of things all alone. Whatever said and done, apart from a few subtle differences here and there, this is a typical day. Sounds familiar? If you're connected to at least one aspect of that story, you have come to the right place. If it was too far off, then this webinar might not be the right fit for you. Being out of balance could be a rite of passage. The world today is extremely overwhelming. Your jobs, your families, you have kids. Some of you might be continuing education today. You have finances to take care of. Top it off with the overconnectedness that technology has brought into our lives. And we all know what happened the last year. COVID hit us hard and it's made only harder. Thanks to both our bosses, our clients, all of you are literally in our homes today. We are literally one day away from a breakdown. Breakdowns are usually inconvenient for everyone, so unsurprisingly, there's this immediate rush to avoid it at all costs. But what we often don't realize is how a breakdown may not be necessarily bad. An alternative explanation is that, in fact, it is one part of our mind trying to force another part into a process of growth, understanding, and development, which has refused to undertake till now due to many other distractions, which we simply refer to as life. So quite paradoxically, it's a rite of passage to wellness instead of what we usually assume it to be, an illness, to be suppressed, to be hid. I'm not saying all breakdowns are the same, but what I'm trying to say that illness is merely a sign that something needs dire attention. And if we attend to it in a right manner, we have health as a real possibility. So why don't we simply listen to these needs calmly and prevent a breakdown? We avoid it. It's because it's an adaptive function not to change. One of the theories, called the self-protective theory of resistance, explains it beautifully. We need a coherent sense of self in order to properly function in our everyday life. It offers us much needed stability and predictability. But what once served stability or homeostasis, we psychologists have big words for everything, need not be adaptive in a new context. So which is when earlier solutions becomes later problems, vis-a-vis the ever so famous defense mechanisms that the infamous Freud talks about. On most days, we are barely surviving actually. We might not have the time to pause. We feel we have to keep running. We can't stop now. Our minds tell us any pause can do more harm. We are literally in a battlefield. When you're constantly in a battlefield, you get tired. Fight and flight responses kicking biologically, and you eventually exhaust yourself. And when we don't have to survive, we avoid. Um, Not today, our mind says. I just want to unwind, relax, have the drink, not face this actual problem. We feel it can wait. So, do we actually have a choice? Are you surviving today? Are you avoiding? Or do we have this third choice? Wherever you are today on the spectrum of possibility spaces, you have a choice. If you are having a breakdown currently or are on the verge of one, stop everything that you're doing. You need help. You need to help yourself to get that help. And that is a choice. The right mental health professional can change your trajectory and pace at which you heal. But you need to make that first step. But if you are in an okay space, you can do something there as well. Imagine creating this garden, a garden that bears fresh fruits, vegetables, flowers. So instead of you having to go to that local supermarket every week to buy all these vegetables and fruits, which are doused with pesticides, when you are in a garden, your own garden, you get nourished, you're watered, you grow. We can build that garden, a sacred garden, and we call that primary prevention. Now, primary prevention is not a guarantee card that nothing bad will happen to you. It's more like an insurance policy that when something bad does happen, you know what to rely on. So what I'm trying to say in short is there are two pathways for dealing with life's challenges. One is avoidance, and the other is awareness into who you are. We can cultivate good habits so much so that we can actually avoid a complete breakdown. So how do we cultivate this garden? Let's start with your day. Very often, it's the everyday that comes between you and your success and happiness. When the approach is to avoid a loss, then attain a win, success actually becomes a long shot. But before we go into what we can do, let us understand the problem. Let's understand what affects your everyday, because we can't solve any problem before we understand it fully. First off, it's a no-brainer, and I don't have to state it for it to be heralded as truth. In the larger scheme of things like class, race, culture, gender impacts all of us, our growth, our well-being. And every progress that we have made as a species came around when we started resolving them, at least partially. So it's in all of our best interest to think about said issues. And due to the same, here I am asking you this question. Does gender then play a more significant role in our day-to-day life than we think? Let's check with a simple activity. So I would like you to answer the following questions. If you're currently not in a partnership, imagine that you are and start answering these questions. If you don't have children, imagine if you did have children and answer these questions. Let us clear out the demographics first. Are you male or female? Are you currently working or are you a homemaker? Do you belong to a single income or a dual income household? If you have already answered those questions, let's move into the actual questions. So I'll first give you an example of the instructions as to how do you go about answering this question. For example, if I ask you the question, who cooks most of the time? If you cook most times in a week, more than 50% of the time in the week, you answer me. If your partner cooks more times than you, more than 50% of the time, then you answer them. But if both of you are actually divided the work and both of you actually cook mostly, then, and if it's more than 80% of the time, then you answer both. Is it clear? So I'm just going to repeat the instructions once again. Answer me and them if it's more than 50% of the time. Answer both only if it is 80% of the time. Let's move on to questions. The first question. Who wakes up first in your house on most days? Okay. The second question. Who's charge of cooking, ensures food is on the table, ensures the fridge, groceries are all stocked up for the rest of the day and the week? The third question. Who's in charge of the cleaning, ensures that the house look decent and livable? If you have a maid who manages her, I don't know if you are the maid, but if you have a maid who manages her. Fifth question, who handles the laundry mostly? Sixth question, who throws the garbage? 7, who baths the kids, gives them their meals, sits with them for their classes or homework? Next, who calls the parents, in-laws, regularly checks on them, also ensures your parents, in-laws are taking their medication and has their health checks on time? Next, who cleans up after dinner? Last question, who puts the kids to bed, if any, ensures the lights are off, everything is done with, and the doors are locked? Now a question that shifts the balance. The one I asked initially a little while ago. Do you belong to a single income or a dual income household? If you belong to a dual income household and answered them to more than 5 questions, it means that despite a day job, your partner seems to be doing at least 5 to 8 hours of more work per day. And if you answered me, it is you who's doing that extra work. So this other day, I tested these questions on a guinea pig, my husband. He answered 5 both, 3 them, 2 me first. I asked him to be a little more honest, and I got 5 both, 4 them, and 1 me. I then asked him if I had asked these questions 6 months ago or a year ago, would he have given the same answers? He sat there surprised. He then very innocently said, but I thought I was gender equal. What do you mean? You see, we have been actually practicing a lot of what I'm going to come to eventually in this webinar, real tough conversations and applying all the tips that we are going to come to. This is just a reflection exercise, very frankly, and not a standardized test. But let's actually do a reality check, which is based on research that's been conducted across time. Carlson and colleagues, 2016, examined how housework might be connected to relational well-being. They studied around 900 participants in 2006. About half the participants reported that women actually do most of the routine housework. And if both men and women work full-time and have a child, the woman actually handles twice the housework and 3 times the childcare in comparison to the men. And this data is still the data from the US. Have you ever thought about all of this before you answered all these questions? If you did you do something about it? The truth is, these things are invisible. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. So if you are a middle-class educated Indian male, chances are that you are far more privileged than the middle-class educated Indian female. But if you are a middle-class Indian female, you are far more privileged than, say, for example, your maid. So what can we do? We literally have to open our eyes. Making things visible means making it real, and then we can do something about it. Mark you, making things visible does not mean blame or going into this victim narrative. The truth is that gender is not an easy conversation for both genders and is almost met with an immediate resistance. What research shows is that gender does influence our well-being and everyday life, both positively and negatively. So let's go into actual data. how gender inequality impacts your well-being. What is predominantly seen, unfortunately, is a skew. Women often find themselves at the tail end of the bargain. They find themselves bumping up a lose-lose situation. Women who works often gets judged that they don't spend, they're not a good wife, they are not a good mother, that they're not doing good enough for the in-laws. And in fact, however, at work, their supervisors and the colleagues might feel that she's a liability because she has a family. When women are actually trying to juggle all of these things, the first thing to go out is self-care and a focus on relationships. And then they go into a survival mode. I'm going to talk about a few biases that women face. This is a study done over 35 years and is summarized in this book, What Works for Women at Work. You can go back and read upon this. I'm going to keep it very brief and talk about the biases. There are 4 major biases. The first one is called the prove it again bias. The prove it again bias is when women, and actually all minorities, have to prove time and again that they are competent. Proving it once is not just enough. The next bias is called the tightrope bias. A tightrope bias, literally as the word claims, is the difficulty in balancing our masculinity and femininity within us. So when a woman is on top of their game at work, if she's the boss, people have this tendency to judge her. And people you might, if you are a boss yourself, you might have heard terms like, no wonder, nobody likes me because she's too masculine. Or no wonder anybody takes her seriously because either she's too feminine. So that is called the tightrope. They often have to balance this out so that they can achieve something at work. The next bias is something called the maternal wall. The maternal wall is the bias wherein both your family and your workplace use your family commitments as a reason to hold you back. So your family might start saying, you know what, it's time to have a baby right now. Maybe you might have to think of a lightest job. Maybe you should think of quitting the job right now because it's too stressful. You're never home. At work, people might say that, you know what, let your colleague take up that project because you're going to have a baby right now, right? You're getting married. What research has proven, unfortunately, is that this maternal wall bias actually starts as early as the time that a woman actually gets engaged. So they don't have to get, they don't have to actually become a mother for a maternal wall bias. If they get engaged, it starts right there. The last bias is a very tricky bias. The fourth one is called the tug of war. The tug of war is a very unique bias. It's a summation of the first 3, the prove it again, the tightrope, and the maternal wall, but it is magnified because it is women who apply harsh standards to one another. So we've all heard of that phrase that the women are women's worst enemies, and this is that particular bias that we're talking about. So imagine this scenario wherein a woman boss, like your boss, might be telling your junior, like to you, or you are the boss, maybe. If you are, please change this. The boss might say, you have to prioritize. Isn't this job important to you? Do you think I got to where I am today without making all the tough choices? And this puts a lot of women in a lot of fix. What do they choose? And this is the tug of war that we are talking about. We've already discussed what happens at home, so I'm not going into that. Health. Literally everything goes for a toss. Mental, physical, relational health. So maybe we should look at how equality actually affects well-being. Equality is win-win for all, not just for women. It's win-win for men, it's win-win for countries, it's win-win for companies, it's win-win for families, children, everyone. Gender equal companies score highest on the happiness scale. Gender equal companies have lower job turnover, higher job satisfaction, higher rates of productivity. Gender equal families. Actually, when men share the housework and childcare, they do better. So 30 years ago, leading child psychologist Michael Ram reminded us, fathers are the forgotten caregivers, contributors to child development. In fact, when fathers are present, children do better in school, They have less likely to have mental health issues, and they're less likely to be on medications. The wives are happier, healthier, and they report of higher levels of marital satisfaction. And these are all based on real good data and research, by the by. The men themselves are healthier and happier. They smoke less, drink less, they take drugs less, and in fact, they also get to have more sex. What we also notice is that gender neutral families, gender neutral in the sense where equality is present, the divorce rates are half in such families. So the first step of the day is egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is simple. Basically, let's call for equality of genders and anything else. When human beings are treated equally, the well-being improves drastically. Now, let's now that we have put gender out of the picture, we can move to less political politics and finally focus on the self. Such a relief, right, to keep gender out. Exactly why it is so much better for all of us, for our well-being. So let's start refocusing on the self now. So there are two complementary strategies for improving the human condition. One is to relieve that which is negative in your life, and the other is to strengthen what is positive. Said Martin Seligman, he's the father of positive psychology. So what we try to do then as psychologists is to study protective factors and use positive emotions and traits to combat problems. Happiness. We all want to be happy, right? But what research data shows is that only 10% of our happiness is due to external circumstances. And a full 90% is based on our inner environment, with 50% of our happiness coming from our genes and as much as 40% being accounted for our intentional daily activities and the choices we make on a day-to-day basis. So where do we start? So we start with reconnecting to ourselves. So how many of you think you are self-aware? The truth is that 95% of the people actually think they are self-aware, but only 10 to 15% actually are. So you and I may not be actually as self-aware as we thought we were. So gaining self-awareness of your mindsets can actually help you see your behaviors in a different light. For example, we all have mindsets like striving for perfection, but it can only lead to judge yourself as well as others. We all want to not let other people down, but this will lead us to overcome it. We want to please others, but this will lead to a lot of incongruence within the self. A mindset to also relook could be the very idea of balance itself. So being honest with oneself can be such a healing experience. So when you share it, you can send a ripple out there to everyone around you. Gratitude. Being grateful can significantly increase your happiness, protect you from stress, anxiety, and depression. What research has proven is that regular gratitude practice can counter the brain's negativity bias. So this is a bias wherein if you remember what I just mentioned a little while ago, we have a survival mechanism, which is the priority, right? In order to survive, we have to perceive negativity and stress and threats in our environment. And because of the same, our brain is biased towards negativity. So now, in order to train it to at least start seeing the whole picture, we might have to start becoming a little more positive to see the whole picture. So an activity that psychologists suggest is 21 days of writing down 3 things every single day that you're grateful for. Mark you, those 3 things should be new. So you can't say the same things all over again every single day. It has to be different on every single day. Moral of the story, count your blessings daily. It actually has a measurably positive effect on our well-being. Now, self-awareness, we'll move on to emotions. We all get emotional. What are emotions? Emotions are subjective states of mind. They are reactions to internal stimuli. The internal stimuli are that which there are thoughts and memories or events that occur in the environment or external stimuli. Now, what you have to also understand and clarify is emotions are not the same thing as moods. Moods is a state of mind that exists even beforehand itself, whereas emotions are reactions to events. So some event moves you to react, and that is an emotion. Now, are emotions good? In fact, what studies prove is that emotions motivate us to survive. So each basic emotion actually has its own purpose. But when our emotions dictate our responses, we can literally go out of balance. So what can we do there? Is there something that we can do in our everyday life to reset all of it? So there's something called the Rosenberg reset. One choice, the formula is very simple. One choice, 8 unpleasant emotions, and ride the wave for 90 seconds. I'll probably explain it a little more detail. Most of us believe that our happiness in life comes from the big choices that we make, like that career or marriage or divorce. This is what will lead to our happiness. It actually is not the big choices, is what science proves. The real misconception there is the moment-to-moment choices. It's those that matter, because it's these moment-to-moment choices which will add up to those big choices eventually. So the one choice, which is step one, that you have to make is to stay present fully in the present moment. Yesterday, for example, I actually had a bad fight with my partner. And frankly, I forgot to apply this. But whenever I do, it actually saves a lot of headache. So how do we go about doing this? Go back to recent memory. Check with yourself. This recent memory could be a disagreement with your partner or at work, anything for that matter. If things didn't go as planned, how did you feel? Frustrated? Example. So you check in with yourself. Did you do what most of us do? Did you run? Did you hide? Did you shut down? Did you distract by watching Netflix? Did you distract by shopping, using drugs, eating food, ordering food, social media? Now, there are other lesser ways of distracting, which is we stop breathing properly, our muscles tighten up, we don't relax. Or did you actually stay in the present moment? And that's the best choice right there, because you chose to stay in the moment. Second step is to deal with 8 unpleasant emotions. What are those 8 unpleasant emotions? They are sadness, shame, helplessness, anger, vulnerability, embarrassment, disappointment, and frustration. Now, I hope that all of you are listening, but if you are having trouble keeping up, all of this data will be there on YouTube. You can always go back to it. And also on my website, there are PDFs to do all of this activities. So you can go back to my website and download. So we'll move on to the third step. See, most of us don't like those feelings, right? These unpleasant emotions. So they are not bad or negative, actually. They're just unpleasant and uncomfortable. So step 3 is to ride this wave for literally 90 seconds or more than that. What research shows us that our body and our neurons actually keeps firing only for 90 seconds. But it is us, because we don't stay in the moment, it keeps repeating and repeating and repeating, and sometimes it lasts for the entire hour or the entire day. Your body is trying to communicate to your emotional brain, and your emotional brain is trying to communicate to your rational brain. So if you simply let that communication to complete, what will happen is you will reset. And this is the basic tip. So please try it and see how it works for you. The next tip is to be aware of your body. Have you driven a car? And if you imagine driving a car and this car just keeps going backwards, and whatever you do does not keep going forward, you'll feel frustrated, right? But what we failed to notice was a gearbox. It was in the reverse gear. Now that sounds very simple. The analogy sounds very simple, but very often our car is in the reverse gear, and the car that I'm speaking of is our body. We are traveling this journey of life in our bodies. And if our body isn't healthy, we might end up going backwards than forward. So happiness is literally good for your health and vice versa. So if your body is healthy, you can be happy. A lot of studies, like the data that you can see on the slide, shows the same. If you eat healthier, you are happier. If you're more physically active, you're happier. So in short, get physically active, eat well, get an adequate amount of sleep. Now that we've talked about body, mind, and your emotions, I talked about how balance itself can be a mindset that we have to relook at. In fact, work is not draining for a lot of people. Sometimes work can be quite energizing. And home life, when you go back to your wife or your husband, might not be as energizing as it sounds. It's not as romantic as it sounds. So instead, try to manage energy. energy management can be more practical and more useful solution. Now, how do you find what to energize you? Let me recommend another activity. And again, the PDF of it is freely available on my website for you to download. Step 1, find your activity that energizes you, one activity that energizes you and drains you. Over the course of the day or week, try to get an energy pulse. Energy can be measured as high. If you look at the image in the screen, energy can be measured as high energy, low energy, negative energy, and positive energy. So try to check your emotions. So we learned how to do that. Check your emotion, check where your body is at, and determine which zone you are at. So if you are at a high energy, positive energy, you are in your performance zone. And depending on the other combinations, you will be in your survival zone, a burnout zone, or a recovery zone. We'd all like to be in the performance zone all the time. But what you have to remember is that we are limited human beings at the end of the day, so we can't perform all the time. So what will happen is that without knowing, most of us will actually slip into a high energy, negative energy zone, which is a survival zone. And without knowing, eventually we might actually find ourselves in the low energy, negative zone, which is the burnout zone. But it does not have to be that way. We can be in a low energy, but positive energy space, which is a recovery space. And this is step 2. Once you identify over the week, after observing which activities increase your energy and which activities decrease your energy, you try to embed it into your daily life. To begin with, plan the ritual you commit to in great detail. Keeping a journal helps to reinforce your success. A few examples to start off, just to give you. For example, if it's physical activities like exercise, dancing, a warm, relaxing bath, these are all high energy activities which will actually re-energize you and calm you. Mental would be journaling, this webinar, for example, going for a course. Emotional is talking to a friend, watching a movie, etc., etc. What you also have to understand is many of these activities touch upon more than one domain. So, for example, if you choose an activity like talking to a friend, it could be social, emotional, and spiritual all at the same time. And some of the other additional activities that I would like to recommend is you can even try to invest in therapy. Therapy can re-energize you. You can try individual group formats. You can try to invest in a mentor. Mentors can help you grow and flourish. You can be a mentor because in you trying to mentor somebody, you're also energized and you energize somebody else. Now that we talked about all of this, how do we implement it in a day? A few tips to start off before I move into the activity. Use technology to assist you than eat up your time. For example, if you have one app like Google Calendar and you can schedule everything into that, don't have many apps which will do the same function. Just keep that one app and delete all the other apps. Also delete apps like social media. I don't think nobody will listen to me when I say that you should delete your social media apps, but probably gaming and things like that. And another thing that you can also do is work around your productivity peaks. If you re-energized, if you really observed your day and like that and actually do the activity that I recommended earlier, what you'll notice is that there are time frames where you're actually highly productive and where you're lowest on productivity. So work around your productivity peaks. If you're really productive in the early morning, schedule your meetings and appointments, most important appointments around that time. Now, the next tip is don't strive for the perfect schedule. Strive for a realistic one. Always try to be smart. So I'll explain what smart means. I'll fill in what smart means. Also leave room for spontaneity in your schedule. Your schedule should not be very strict, which is why I said it should be smart. Create a habit out of it and implement all these recovery practices also into your schedule. Manage your time, set limits, learn to say no. No means no. And unplug when you live for work. So this is this activity that I was talking about, the ideal life, ideal day activity. Now, step 1, to design your ideal life. Again, like I said, all of this is available, so we can just listen to it right now. In the ideal life activity, step 1, write down your ultimate goal. What specifically do you want to achieve and by what date? For example, I want to start my website by the end of this month. Now, step 2 would be ask yourself what is the milestone that you need to achieve a little before, maybe by the 20th of this month, so that you're in a position to achieve your final goal. So maybe the milestone that I have to decide, for example, should be that my content, my designs, everything should be in place. Now keep working backwards and then eventually come to that immediate step that you have to do by tomorrow. So now this technique is called backward planning. We psychologists call it backward planning. So you can go back and read up on backward planning. The next step is to define your goals clearly by using a technique called SMART goals. SMART goals stand for specific. So as you decide your goal, make it specific, make it measurable, make it achievable, make it realistic, make it time bound. So you have to set time, and this is the way that your goals will be SMART. Now prioritize them and write them down in your story. You might have to reorganize your timeline and see where it goes into the timeline in the backward planning. Then you identify the immediate next steps. Now put these immediate next steps into your schedule, into your calendar. Track your schedule every day. Commit to your schedule. Maybe now you can actually use your social media to your advantage. Put it out there that I'm committing to losing weight for the next 6 months. I'll probably try and lose around 5 kilos of weight. 6 months. Please do healthily. Yeah. So that is the ideal life, ideal day activity. You can try and implement this. So we move on to reconnecting to your significant other. So we have connected to yourself right now, and your body, your time, your schedules, and things like that. Now you're connecting back to your significant other, your partner. Talk to your partner. A client recently told me, I know what I want of him, but to think of it, he does not know what I want from him. I have to tell him that, right? Often couples find themselves wanting to mind read and expecting a lot from your partner. But what we often forget is a relationship is built on trust. And often the relationship falls short because trust, we have not given sufficient time to building trust. So how to build trust? Brené Brown is a professor who studies courage, vulnerability, shame, and trust. She comes up with this acronym called BRAVING. BRAVING stands for boundaries, reliability, accountability, vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. What is boundaries? Boundaries are the limits and rules that we set for ourselves within a relationship. This is not to keep somebody out, but it is to keep us and the relationship safe. It's just like a house. You build a house to keep us safe. You're not building a house to keep people out. So if you have boundaries, realistic, healthy boundaries, the relationship actually grows and thrives. And when your boundaries are unclear, it's important that partners communicate about what is not okay, what is okay. You're willing to say a no, and you're willing to hear a no as well. Reliability. Reliability is very important in relationships. Reliability is when you do what you say you will do. So if you commit to cooking for the day, and if you did it, you are reliable. If you didn't do it, you aren't reliable. We move on to then accountability. We are not perfect as human beings. So just be accountable. You will always make mistakes. So when you made a mistake, just be accountable, own your mistake, apologize, and make amends. The vault. The vault is basically, you should feel that your relationship is a safe space. Whatever you share in the relationship stays in the relationship and does not go out of the relationship. So it's like a secret vault. And that develops trust. The next is integrity. Integrity is when you choose courage over comfort. When you choose avoidance, when you choose awareness over avoidance. You choose what is right over what is fun, easy. And you choose to practice your values than simply professing it. Non-judgment. Your relational space should be a space of non-judgment. You should feel like you can go to the partner and actually express whatever you need. And your partner should feel vice versa. If you can't, then there is something to do with trust is going wrong in your relationship. Generosity. Generosity is when you extend the most generous interpretation possible to the action of others. Now, your partner may make a mistake and try to be generous that they didn't do it actually on purpose. They are not harming you. That probably they are actually made a mistake, a genuine mistake. And that would be generosity. So try to build trust by communicating. And how to communicate is something that we think that we know how to communicate, but really what we notice in couple sessions are that we barely have issues. We have a lot of issues in communication. If you start a conversation with, can you help me out? Or do I have to do everything around here? In fact, you're bound to fight. So Gottman's are institute which studies couple communication, and they came up with an acronym called ATTUNE. So ATTUNE is when you are trying to communicate. ATTUNE stands for aware. So you remember we had talked about emotions, right? A little before. The first step is to be aware of your emotion, but it's also important in a relationship to be aware of the other's emotion. So be aware of the of the partner's emotion. So you can ask questions like, what are you feeling? How are you? And things like that. So when you see your partner and when you're aware, they feel like you care. Turning towards is the next step. So turning towards is the next step. Turning towards is when, you have recognized the emotion that they're feeling, but you also have to turn towards and ask and show that you care. Tolerance. See, most of the time when your partner is actually very emotional, it might not be realistic. It might be too much for you to handle. And you might be tempted to say enough. Or you might be tempted to say, let's look at the bright side. It's not a big deal. Take it easy. This is very disappointing. So instead, try to tolerate emotion and stay with it. Understand the emotion. Ask more questions and try to understand the emotions. Non-defensive listening. So you keep listening and you do not try to correct or defend your position. Ask yourself a question: is what I want to say right now going to clarify my opinion or my partner's opinion? You can say anything if it is going to support your partner, but if not, keep your mouth shut. Empathy. Empathy, if knowledge is mental understanding, empathy is emotional understanding, heart understanding. Empathy allows the partner to feel that you're actually with me. So how do you do that? You have to literally try and imagine how your partner is feeling and treat their emotion as your own. Now, if you can't do all this attuning and conversations because it's a big fight that you're having with your partner, try to take a break. As simple as that. Take a break, only come back to the conversation when you are calm. And try to, be a teammate, a partner in every sense of the word. Please remember that we are on the same team if you're in a relationship. We are not on the opposite sides of the team. Now, another activity that you can also do is to actually set aside time every week to reflect on the previous week and discuss your upcoming schedule. So you can literally negotiate your daily activities. This is the activity that I'm talking about. You can download it. Basically, just sit with your partner, set aside time, take a pen and paper and classify what are the activities and responsibilities that you are supposed to do in the house this week. What am I supposed to do? And what are we supposed to do as a couple together? And it's very important that you just do not think about it in your head. You have to sit with your partner, talk about it and write it down and put it out there to others. We're coming to the near end of the seminar, so bear with me. Family and friends, very important. They should be on top of our to-do list. Connection is very important, can boost mental health. And what we notice is that when people around us are happy, our happiness also increases. This extends to third degree contact. For example, if you're with a friend of a friend of a friend, and if that person is happy, chances that after meeting, you will also be happier. And that's how much a family and friend can influence you. In fact, the last year was very hard for me. And I feel that the reason that I actually went ahead and, I could live this life out was because of my own family and friends. They are a great deal of support. Network and community. Network. When we hear the word network, what we think of is LinkedIn. And, going for such events and saying hi, bye, and, shaking hands and things like that. There is value in growing network to increase the number of people that you know. But it's far more important when you build community. Now, community is a network with shared goals and aspiration, and where people reach out with a purpose, with a shared purpose. Now, for example, Prayaana is the community because we all come here together with a shared purpose and goal. This ends up building a stronger connection Communities are far more powerful because of this one important difference, and thus invest in both networks as well as communities. Workplace. What people think is that if I work hard, I will be successful. If I am successful, I'll be happy. Unfortunately, this formula is backwards, which is what research proves. The brain at a positive is 31% more productive. Therefore, people thrive in an environment where strengths are emphasized. So if you are at work, negotiate for a workplace which actually propagates happiness. If you are a superior or a boss, try to create a workplace which can, actually, it's like Google and many companies actually try to create such workspaces. Workplace flexibility is another thing. This is a business strategy. Basically, they allow workers to make choices based on the core aspects of work. Basically, when and how long the work was performed. So based on your time, place, and the kind of task that you do, the worker is given a flexibility. So if you are a worker, negotiate for this. If you are a boss, give your workers or your employees workplace flexibility to increase productivity and happiness and well-being. Building professional credibility. Most often women fall back on this around the time they get married. They think that, my career is anyways going to come to an end. I don't have to work too hard. I can, just sit back and relax. Anyways, after 2 years, I'll have a baby. No. In fact, work on building your credibility. If you do good work today, and if you're going to take a break tomorrow, it's fine. Because if you're credible and people actually saw your work and trust you, they will come back to you, and your comeback will be far more easier and faster. So invest in building professional credibility. Also, something that I've mentioned before, invest in mentoring. You can mentor somebody and you can be mentored. And if you are a boss, if you are a really superior position in your company, use your power and position to help everybody around you in your workplace. It makes a whole lot of difference. Now, Murphy was right. Who's Murphy? I don't know if you've heard of Murphy's Law. If you haven't, it's an adage. This adage is basically says that if something has to go wrong, it will go wrong. In short, shit happens. Now, strength is not the absence of weakness. Life can be very unkind. And as long as we are alive, we are not immune to what will happen to us. And unfortunately, it does not discriminate. The last year was very tough for me and for my family. We all got COVID and survived it. I had to shut down my clinic due to lockdown. I went into losses. My husband lost his job. We hit a financial low. I lost vision in one of my eyes. Our marriage went through a very rough patch. I have been diagnosed with a list of metabolic and autoimmune conditions. This list will keep going on. It's a little too long. In fact, just as I was putting thoughts down for this presentation, for this talk over the weekend, my favorite nephew, who's all of 4, was bitten by a snake and was in the ICU. This is what I meant by shit happens. Now, did I have a choice? In such situations, when shit happens, literally, we can develop resilience. And there are 3 tips that I would like to offer you. There are 3 ways that you can try to think. We often, when problems attack us, we start thinking, why me? But we should try to think, why not? In fact, all of us have something or the other going on right now in our lives. So try to think, why not me? And this can give a much needed perspective shift for your mind. The next thing, so that something that actually works, is switch your focus, selective attention. Now, switching focus, like to try to imagine there's a switch in your mind actually, and you can actually literally flip that switch. And you can flip the switch. We have talked about negativity bias. So try to flip it to being, what are the things that you can change right now? Maybe the last year was shitty, but I can work on this year. I can probably do something about this. I'm taking a sabbatical right now because of my issues, but I can be sad about it. I can say, oh my God, I lost so much. I don't know how to come back to work, etc., etc. Or I can relook at this and I can see what is the potential that the sabbatical can offer me. And that is another way of looking at life. The third thing is a question that you keep asking to yourself, is what I'm doing helping me or harming me? So very often what happens is that when we have a fight with our partner or with our boss or something, we come back and we just want to, just do something very unhealthy, like probably watching Netflix all night long. But this is unhealthy. It is going to harm you, right? You're losing out on speed, on your sleep. You might try alcohol. You might try drugs. And all of this is just going to harm you. It's not going to help you. So for a second, just pause and ask yourself, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? You can go back and check on Dr. Lucy Hone. She's a resilience expert, and she gave a beautiful TED talk on the same. And she was one who inspired me about on this slide for right now. So another mindset that you can think about is, think of growth. Be expansive. Don't be fixed. Don't be rigid. Try to focus on your process. Don't focus on outcomes. Because if your process is right and healthy, your outcome will eventually be right. So trust that. So everything I've advised you here as an expert psychologist, by extrapolating from the best of research in my decades of practice, is what I'm applying to my everyday life. So this works. Research proves it. What I see every day in my brave clients proves it. What I've seen in my life and I've applied in my life also proves it. I literally do all the suggestions that I've talked about in this presentation. So I would like to leave with this thought. True strength is in knowing and in experiencing the truth that in fragility lies a possibility. When we work on our weaknesses, we make it our strength. So I'm just going to rewind. In short, the takeaway is that take a step back, look at the big picture. For every day, keep pausing, reflect, respond, then react. Make time for yourself, make time for your body, make time for your partner, friends, family, and work. Avoid avoidance, choose awareness. Play a more active role in your story, in your narrative. Focus on processes than outcomes. For your life, look at this moment in the larger scheme, the movie of your life. This moment may not be as significant as you think or as insignificant as you think. So try to look at it more holistically in a balanced manner. Take a step forward and write your story. Pick just one of the suggestions. So it was a lot of information, so I know that, but which is why the best is to pick just one of the suggestions from each slide or topic I presented and try to implement it in your everyday practice using that ideal day, ideal life work activity. Do it for 21 days. Usually what we've seen is that when you try something for 21 days, it becomes a habit, or as long as it takes to make a habit out of it. You can download the activity PDFs from my website, www.lingeorgie.com. I'd like to thank Prayaana, Tejaswini, and Elsa, and the team for helping me set up this talk and give this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for pointing out on various emotions as well as circumstances in our daily lives, and also sharing the live tasks with all our viewers for today's session. And also your perspectives on certain circumstances in life can make things simple and win over complexity. Thank you so much. With this, we come to our Q&A session where our viewers have posted few queries. It would be great if you could answer those, ma'am. So our first viewer asks, I tend to overthink at times and fail to realize when I'm into such thoughts. How can I be more conscious about this and try to remind myself about the reality of such situations?
That's a very good question. I think we also tried covering something on those lines in the talk itself. So what I would actually advise is the Rosenberg reset from the talk. But in short, overthinking is something that we do when we are a lot anxious. So there is some anxiety that you could probably be facing in your life, and that's the reason that you might be running into overthinking in spaces like that. So what I would rather suggest is try to take breaks in your life. Try to start journaling. When you start journaling, you're cultivating this habit of observing your mind. Another thing that you can try is mindfulness. Mindfulness meditation is something, it's like the in thing right now. But mindfulness actually is something that will develop the skill of pausing and helping you stop your overthinking and in fact observe your thinking process. So the two techniques that I would like to recommend is mindfulness and journaling, and these both can help you in your overthinking. um, and uh, and that's something that I thought can help you right now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think this would have helped the viewers who posed the question. The next question from our viewer is that we knew very well that our past experiences are disturbing our present life. How to forget and forgive people to make our lives smooth?
Yeah, I think that is one of the most hardest things to do, right? To forget and forgive. I don't think I think it's very hard for us to actually forget, because at the end of the day, as long as our brains are functioning right, we can't forget. So rather, it might be more important for us to forgive. And forgiveness is such a huge task, and it will only depend on where you are at and depending on the situation that you are in. So, um, one thing that I would like to recommend is to take charge and take back power into your life. Often you have the reason that you want to forget or forgive something is because somebody or something has hurt you so bad and life has set you back. So what I would recommend is try to step back and look at this event in a neutral manner as much as you can, and try to focus on things just the way I was talking about towards the end. uh, Try to build resilience, try to ask the questions, why not me? Try to ask the questions, what is this helping me? Is me thinking about all these events and how this other person hurt me is actually helping me, or is it harming me right now? This is not working for me out in the present. So try to selectively focus your attention on the today than the past. It's very difficult. It can be quite challenging. Now, if the past is very difficult and has been significant and it's a very huge event, then what I would really suggest is to try going in for therapy. At the end of the day, if somebody can sit with you and work through your unique problems, and that is the best thing that I can advise when it comes to forgiving and forgetting. So I recommend individual therapy actually.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next viewer asks, how to tackle when people close to us change their behavior towards us and might sound annoying and starts disturbing in our daily life.
Can you repeat that question again?
How to tackle when people close to us change their behavior towards us and might sound annoying, which starts disturbing in our daily life.
Okay, thank you, Tejaswini. Um, this is, I think, what we can apply here is what I was covering in reconnecting to the significant other. When people change their behaviors, something is either happening in their lives or something is either happening in between you and this person in the relationship. The only thing that can help is to rebuild trust and to communicate. So you might have to try to figure out why exactly is this person behaving differently. You might have to ask this person to come and actually have a conversation with you based on the techniques that I had talked about, the braving acronym and the attune acronym. These two things really help. If you really want to look into it, I would really suggest you to go back and read up on these two, or vis a vis go to a therapist, because they can help you in actually implementing this step by step. So that's something that I would recommend. Um, so try to be generous. Maybe this person is going through something. So try to be generous and kind, and with compassion, try to understand why this person is behaving out of the ordinary. Now, there could be a chance that they aren't perfect and they might be doing something and they are hurting you, and which means that you might have to now figure this out and you might have to relook at the relationship. So all in all, try to go back to the reconnect to yourself, reconnect to others part of the seminar, and maybe that will help you in this regard.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question posted by our viewer sounds very familiar situation which all of us might have faced. So he or she asks, How to converse with a friend with whom we fought recently.
That's interesting. Step one is to call the friend and actually talk to this person. But jokes aside, what I'm trying to say is often what stops us from having the conversation is our own emotions and what got triggered in that fight. And maybe this friend is also not willing to have a conversation, so that's a different story. But it's important for you to observe in yourself as to what are you feeling and why do you not want to have this conversation. What is stopping you from having this conversation? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling hurt? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling that this friend didn't understand some part of you or your perspective? Try to first have a clarity on what happened to you when you had this fight. And then once you have this clarity, initiate a step forward and try and schedule a conversation with your friend. And once you do that, this friend might not respond to your calls or might not be ready for a conversation, but at least you now know as to why you were upset and that you tried your best. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. The next question is that if gender differentiation can help us in sharing our work consciously, how can this be practiced from home?
So, like I said, I was mentioning how I was having these conversations with my husband, and it's not been easy actually. It's a very tough conversation. So, we really have to set aside time. Every single day, every single week, try to set aside you and me time, couple time, away from the kids, away from family, away from friends. Maybe you should at least have half an hour per day, in fact, wherein you reconnect with your partner. And when you reconnect with your partner, try to have open conversations based on the principles of trust, based on the principles of attunement. So these principles are the ones that you might have to really go back to. And based on that, try to build a sort of agreement and negotiate how gender might be influencing your relationship and how it is causing a lot of ill health and issues in your life right now. And try to start having these conversations. And but if this isn't working, then you might have to consider some form of couple therapy or marital work.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering all the questions with so much of patience and giving clarity over all the queries which our viewers had. By this, we come to an end of the Q&A session. I thank all the viewers who started sharing their questions and posed their queries as well as their friends' queries here to the YouTube live chat. I also thank Ms.Elsa for taking time and answering all the questions. For any comments or feedback about the session, you can share it as a comment in our channel. And also for advertisements or sponsorship, you can mail us at joinprayaana@gmail.com. Once again, I thank everyone for joining and being a part of this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.